7 weekend builds that actually cut bills. Less feed, less power, more food, and they start paying back almost immediately. These aren't hobby projects. They're the kind that earn their keep the moment you finish them. By the end, you'll see how a few small upgrades can turn a homestead into a self-running setup that quietly saves money. The key is stacking systems that work together. Each one cuts a small cost, but together they build a homestead that runs lean, efficient, and independent. Let's start with the easiest win: capturing water you're already paying for every time it rains. Rain collection sounds simple, but it's one of those builds that can go wrong fast. First, the legal side. Rainwater harvesting is legal in most of the US, but some states regulate it, especially where water rights are tied to downstream use. In Colorado, most homes can store up to 110 gallons. In Utah, you can hold 100 gallons without registering, or up to 2,500 if you do. In Washington, it's legal as long as it's used on site. Local rules vary, so check your county code before you drill. Now, to do it right, use opaque food-grade barrels, never clear or white plastic. Sunlight is what turns them into algae ponds by midsummer. Fit each with a fine stainless screen under the lid and a mosquito-proof overflow vent. If you want a low-maintenance system, add a first flush diverter. It sends the first few gallons of dirty roof runoff out before the rest enters the barrel. That single $20 piece keeps 90% of the roof grit and pollen out of your storage. Once the water's in, treat it gently. Skip the oil trick. Keep the lid tight, install fine stainless mesh on every inlet, and drop in a BTI mosquito dunk once a month in warm weather. Keep the lid tight, and every few months, flush the bottom inch to remove settled sediment. That's what keeps the smell away. In winter, drain everything. Drain the barrels before hard freeze and leave valves open so expanding ice can't split the plastic. At that point, the system's hands-off. It just fills and empties with the weather. If you're on municipal water, you'll save $300 to $400 a year, depending on your rate. If you're on a well, it's less about money and more about security. You're storing water that doesn't require electricity to pump. It's not just a DIY project. It's drought insurance, roof runoff control, and a year-round reminder that self-reliance doesn't need to cost much. It just needs a weekend and a little know-how. Most people underestimate how much heat a single layer of plastic can hold. A hoop-cold frame doesn't need power, heaters, just good design. Built right, it can push your growing season 3 months longer on each end and replace about $250 of store-bought produce per year. Start with 1 or 2 inch EMT conduit, not PVC. PVC degrades under UV and leaches chlorine that can burn seedlings. EMT bends cleanly, lasts a decade, and costs about $5 per $10 foot stick. Use a scrap 2x6 as a baseboard. Screw it into the hoops and add rebar stakes every 3 to 4 feet to keep the wind from turning your project into a kite. For the cover, skip the cheap plastic. 6mm greenhouse poly, UV rated for 4 years, costs around $30 and doesn't go brittle in the sun. Stretch it tight, clamp it with 1-inch plastic clips, and seal the bottom with soil to hold heat overnight. Temperature gain depends on the day. On a 35-degree night, a 4x8 frame usually holds 8 to 12 degrees warmer inside. That's enough to overwinter kale, spinach, or carrots under mulch in most zones. Add a $10 soil thermometer, and you'll know exactly when to vent. That's where most people fail. They cook their crops. Once temps inside hit 65 to 70 degrees, crack the sides or open the ends. Even a few hours of trapped heat can wilt seedlings beyond recovery. Condensation's another killer. If you live in a humid area, open one end daily. Airflow stops fungal pressure and keeps soil from turning sour. A cheap 6-inch vent fan powered by a small solar panel is a smart upgrade if you're running multiple tunnels. In terms of return, the payback is quick. A single 4x8 tunnel grows about $20 to $25 worth of greens a week during shoulder seasons. At grocery prices, it's paid off in under a month. Bonus trick: line the north wall with black 5-gallon jugs filled with water. They absorb heat during the day and release it at night, stabilizing temperature swings by 5 degrees. It's passive climate control. No electric, no extra moving parts. If you do this once, you'll never go back to uncovered beds. It's one of those projects that works harder every single year, not because it's fancy, but because it's physics. If you've ever run an electric dehydrator in July, you know the punchline. Your power bill climbs faster than your jars fill. A solar dehydrator fixes that. It turns sunlight and airflow into shelf-stable food, and the good ones run for decades with no moving parts to break. Skip the cheap black box with racks builds you see online. Those cook unevenly and mold anything on the bottom tray. A proper design separates the collector from the drying chamber. Here's what works. Build a 3-foot-tall collector box, painted flat black inside, with a clear polycarbonate lid angled at 30-40 degrees. That slope maximizes sun exposure and preheats air to around 120 to 140 degrees before it rises naturally through the drying chamber. Line the bottom with corrugated metal painted black. It creates microchannels that warm air evenly. Above that, add a simple air gap, about an inch, then a screened intake vent at the bottom to pull in fresh air. Stack 3 to 4 food-grade drying trays above, made from 1/4-inch hardware cloth or bamboo mesh. Avoid galvanized metal where food touches. Use stainless bamboo or food-grade plastic mesh instead. At the top, cut 2 exit vents with insect screen. You want constant draft? Warm air exits, fresh air enters. That continuous airflow is the difference between crisp apples and moldy leather. Optional but worth it. A small 5-volt USB fan powered by a $10 solar panel. It doubles airflow and cuts drying time in half. It's especially helpful in humid climates, where still air turns food gummy overnight. Now for real-world numbers. On a clear day, a 4-tray dehydrator handles 10 to 12 pounds of sliced produce. Apples take 6 to 8 hours. Tomatoes 10. Herbs 2 to 3. Run that twice a week through summer, and you'll easily save $300 or more in dried fruit, jerky, and herbs each year. Maintenance is minimal. Just brush off trays and reseal the wood with food-safe oil each season. If you notice uneven drying, paint the collector's interior matte again. Dust and gloss kill heat absorption fast. Bonus hack: mount the dehydrator on casters so you can pivot it toward the sun throughout the day. A 20-degree shift can raise internal temps by 10 degrees. No electricity needed, just alignment. Once you build one, it quietly runs itself every sunny day of the year. You load it in the morning, forget about it, and by dinner, you've got food preserved without flipping a single switch. Compost bins are one of those projects that look too simple to matter, until you realize they're quietly replacing a few $100s a year in soil amendments. Forget the store-bought tumblers. They're too small, dry out too fast, and can't handle livestock bedding or kitchen waste in real volume. The best compost system you can build is the old-school 3-bin pallet setup. Cheap, scalable, and built entirely from what's already lying around. Start with 4 heat-treated pallets per bin, not chemically treated ones. Look for the HT stamp. That means they were kiln-dried, not soaked in pesticide. Stand them upright, screw them together into a U-shape, and use removable slats or a hinged front for easy turning. Line the inside with 1-inch wire mesh if you've got small critters around. Raccoons and rats love a warm compost pile. The magic is in aeration and moisture. Most people think compost smells because it's rotting. It's actually because it's anaerobic, suffocating under its own weight. To fix that, lay a base of sticks or coarse mulch a few inches deep before adding anything. It lets air circulate from the bottom up. Alternate layers, 2 to 3 inches of greens, manure, grass, kitchen scraps, with 4 inches of browns, leaves, wood chips, straw. If it looks too dry, mist it. If it smells, add browns. Perfect compost should feel like a wrung-out sponge. Damp, never soggy. Temperature is your built-in gauge. If the pile never heats past 120 degrees, it's starving for nitrogen. If it spikes past 160 degrees, it's cooking microbes to death. Flip it or add browns to cool it down. While it's hot, turn the pile every 7 to 10 days to keep oxygen flowing. A cheap compost thermometer is worth every dollar. You'll never guess again. By midsummer, a single 4x4x4 bin will turn out about a cubic yard of compost, the equivalent of $250 worth of bagged fertilizer. Rotate between 3 bins, 1 filling, 1 cooking, 1 finishing. That cycle gives you constant, usable compost year-round with no downtime. To make it last, staple roofing shingles or scrap metal across the tops. It sheds rain, stops nutrient leaching, and holds heat through cold snaps. If you live in bear country, run a hot wire around the outside. A single low strand deters curious noses without harming wildlife. This is one of those builds that pays in more ways than money. You're not just saving on fertilizer, you're recycling feed waste, bedding, and kitchen scraps into living soil that grows healthier plants next season. No subscription, no special microbes, just biology doing what it's built to do, in a box you built from trash wood. A chicken tractor isn't a novelty. It's a grazing tool. Built right, it lowers feed costs, rebuilds pasture, and keeps birds healthier through daily rotation. But most people miss the balance between weight, protection, and mobility. Too heavy, and you'll never move it. Too light, and the first windstorm or raccoon test will tear it apart. The key metric is square feet per bird. Aim for 8 to 10 square feet per adult layer if you're moving it daily. Less than that, and birds will scalp the ground bare before noon. For a small flock of 6, a 5 by 10 foot footprint is perfect. Light enough to roll, big enough to rest grass between rotations. Start with a base of 2 by 2 lumber and lightweight hardware cloth, not chicken wire. Chicken wire only keeps chickens in, not predators out. Use half-inch hardware cloth on the bottom 12 inches of the walls and attach it with washers and screws instead of staples. Staples pull loose after one good raccoon tug. The roof makes or breaks the design. A corrugated metal roof sheds rain and provides shade, but adds weight. If you're on uneven terrain, use a polycarbonate roof instead. Lighter, still weatherproof, and lets in light for grass regrowth underneath. Add lawnmower wheels on an axle or trailer jack-style lift wheels on one end. You'll move it in seconds without dragging. If you're on rough ground, add PVC skids to the frame. 1.5-inch pipe halves, screwed underneath, glide better than any wheel on soft soil. Feed savings come from design, not feed math. When chickens rotate daily, they'll eat up to 40% less bagged feed. Bugs, grass, and fresh clover replace grain calories. At today's prices, that's about $25 a month saved on a small flock. Roughly $300 per year for something you can build in a weekend. Add a hanging feeder and nipple waterer under the roofline. Keeps everything dry, clean, and off the ground. Hang them from chains so they stay level when you move the tractor. If you live in predator country, go one step further. Zip tie solar motion lights to each corner. They'll trigger at night and stop the midnight digging that kills flocks. For durability, finish all exposed wood with raw linseed oil, not paint. Paint traps moisture. Oil repels water while letting the wood breathe. A properly oiled frame will last 5 to 7 years even in full weather. One last pro tip: never build a tractor wider than your gate. It sounds obvious until you wedge one halfway through and have to dismantle it in the rain. By the time you've rolled it across a few acres, you'll notice the grass behind each move turns greener and thicker. That's the hidden value. It's not just a mobile coop, it's a low-input fertilizer spreader that feeds itself while rebuilding your pasture. Drying herbs and produce with solar heat isn't new, it's just efficient chemistry that doesn't need a plug. Done right, it replaces $10 jars of dried herbs, keeps fruit from spoiling, and gives you off-grid preservation that still tastes like fresh food. Skip the window box Pinterest builds. They trap humidity and grow mold. A functional solar dryer needs 3 things: airflow, heat, and dark space. If you get those right, it'll dry herbs in 24 hours and fruit in 2 or 3. Start with a 2 by 3 foot frame from scrap wood or 1 by 2 pine. Back it with black metal mesh or painted aluminum sheet. This absorbs sunlight and converts it to gentle heat. Over that, add a sloped clear cover, polycarbonate or old greenhouse plastic. The slope is key. It sheds condensation and drives warm air upward. Air enters through screened vents at the bottom and exits through a chimney gap at the top. That rising heat pulls fresh air across the trays constantly, preventing stagnation, the mistake that ruins most home builds. For trays, use food-grade mesh or dehydrator screens stretched across simple wooden frames. Metal window screens are fine if they're aluminum. Never galvanized steel. Zinc off-gassing will ruin flavor. Mount the whole box at a 35 to 45 degree tilt, facing due south if you're in the US. That angle gives full sun exposure through most of the season. Add a back hinge and prop stick so you can open it easily to load trays or vent excess heat. You'll see temperatures hit 100 to 120 degrees inside by midday. Perfect range for herbs, greens, and fruit. Above 130 degrees, and you start losing volatile oils, so if you live in a hot region, paint the collector gray instead of black to temper the heat. Line the bottom with a thin tray of rock salt on humid days. It quietly absorbs moisture from the air and speeds drying without extra equipment. Once dry, store herbs in amber jars or paper bags, never clear plastic. Light breaks down oils within weeks. At that point, you've replaced the equivalent of about $150 a year in store-bought herbs, teas, and dried fruit using only the sun. No fans, no power draw, just thermodynamics. The oldest preservation method that still beats modern energy costs. Frozen troughs are one of winter's biggest hidden costs. Electric tank heaters draw 200 to 300 watts continuously. That's 5 to 7 kilowatt hours a day, or roughly $20 to $25 a month on your bill per trough. But a passive solar heater fixes it with zero power. Start with an old stock tank or rubber tub and build a simple insulated box around it using 2-inch foam board and plywood. Cut a south-facing window in the lid and cover it with clear polycarbonate or tempered glass. Inside that cavity, paint the tank matte black to absorb heat and fill the air gap under the window with dark river stones or recycled bricks. They'll store solar warmth during the day and slowly release it overnight. Add a floating insulated cover, a chunk of rigid foam cut to fit with small holes for animal access. It traps the rising heat while preventing full surface freeze even in sub-zero weather. With full sun, you'll see water temps stay 15 to 25 degrees higher than ambient, enough to keep the top thawed through most winter days. If you want extra reliability, add a 1-inch black irrigation loop coiled on the inside of the lid, fed by a tiny solar fountain pump. When the sun's out, it circulates just enough water to prevent ice crusting. No grid draw required. Maintenance is minimal. Brush dust off the collector glass occasionally, drain and rinse once per season, and make sure the lid seals tight at night. On average, one setup like this replaces 4 to 5 months of electric heater use. That's roughly $200 a year saved for every waterer you convert. Multiply that by multiple troughs, and it becomes one of the fastest paybacks on the list. Plus, it solves one of winter's worst chores, breaking ice twice a day with a hammer. That alone might be worth the build. Rain, $300. Cold frames, $250. The tractor, $300. Compost, $200. Solar dehydrator, $200. Herb dryer, $100. Passive stock tank heat, $150. Add it up, $1,500 a year, or about $125 a month that stays in your pocket instead of going to utilities and feed stores. So that's it. 7 weekend builds that keep paying you back year after year. If you want the quick math, each project takes less than a weekend, costs under $150, and most pay themselves off within 2 to 3 months.
Which one would you build first? The rain capture, the cold frame, or that solar water heater? Or did I miss a project that saves even more? Drop it in the comments. I read every one. And your ideas always shape the next round of builds. See you next time.